In August 1943, Japanese cruisers, each displacing over 13,000 tons of steel and bristling with 8-inch guns, steamed confidently through the darkness. They had ruled the night since Pearl Harbor, their searchlights and torpedoes deciding battles before dawn. Yet on this night, something impossible happened. The attackers weren't cruisers or destroyers. They were plywood boats, barely 80 feet long, with hulls thinner than a farmhouse door and engines that screamed like racing cars. Within minutes, one of Japan's proud warships was burning, its hull torn open by a single torpedo from a craft that weighed less than one of its own gun turrets. The Imperial Navy had just met an enemy they never expected, the U.S. Navy's patrol torpedo boats, the Mosquito fleet. In 1941, the United States Navy had little faith in small boats. Doctrine favored armor, range, and big guns. The PT concept, tiny, fast vessels armed with torpedoes, was considered experimental, almost amateurish. Each craft was a hybrid of naval engineering and hot rod mechanics. 80 feet long, 20 tons light, and powered by 3 Packard V12 engines delivering 4,500 total horsepower. On calm seas, they could reach 41 knots, faster than any Japanese cruiser. Their weapons were simple but deadly. 4 21-inch Mark 8 torpedoes, the same carried by destroyers, with warheads holding 466 pounds of TNT. Yet on paper, they looked suicidal. Their hulls were made of laminated mahogany, not steel. 120mm burst could shred them. They carried no armor, only speed. The Navy built over 800 of them, mostly by Higgins and Elko yards, where men who once made pleasure yachts now built killers in batches of 10. By 1942, as the Solomon Islands campaign raged, these boats became America's answer to a logistical nightmare. Bases were small, air cover thin, and destroyers too valuable to risk nightly. PT squadrons filled the void. At Tulagi and Rendova, they operated from coconut-covered docks and refueled from barrels rolled across mud. Each boat consumed 500 gallons of aviation-grade fuel per patrol. Crews of 12 worked without sleep, sweat soaking through their khaki shirts, hands burned by the vibration of throttles. "We lived on black coffee, Spam, and adrenaline," wrote Lieutenant John Bulkley, commander of Motor Torpedo Boat Squadron 3, Bulkley Diary, 1943. "Our job was simple. Hit them before they saw us." The Japanese called their cruisers the Night Gods. Their long-range Type 93. Long lance torpedoes could reach 20,000 meters and destroy anything afloat. Early in the war, they devastated Allied fleets at night battles off Java and Savo Island. But the PT boats changed the rhythm of darkness. On radar scopes and lookouts' eyes, the small boats barely registered. Their wakes blended with wave crests. Instead of heavy propeller beats, they left the sea whispering behind them. American crews used radar sets the size of typewriters, model SO3 units with a range of 5 miles. It wasn't much, but it gave them seconds of advantage. And in the dark, seconds meant survival. On the night of August 1, 1943, PT-109, commanded by Lieutenant John F. Kennedy, patrolled Blackett Strait near Kolombangara. Japanese destroyers, part of the Tokyo Express, were ferrying troops to the island. The PTs formed a loose picket line, engines idling. Radar flickered, contact uncertain. At 2:30 a.m., lookouts shouted, "Ship bearing green 150. Seconds later, a black wall of steel, destroyer Amagiri, appeared, moving at over 30 knots. Kennedy turned to attack, throttles wide open. The Amagiri rammed first, slicing PT-109 in half. 2 crew died instantly. 11 survived, clinging to the wreckage. The PTs had failed to stop that run, but the Japanese saw how close their invisible enemy had been. "They come from nowhere," recorded Commander Koji Tanaka in his log Tanaka War Diary, 1943. Small, fast, and fearless. Over the following months, the PT flotillas adapted. Engineers replaced the unreliable Mark 8 torpedoes with the new Mark 13, fitted with contact and magnetic exploders. The boats received 50 caliber Brownings, 20mm Oerlikons, even salvaged 37mm aircraft cannons bolted to their decks. Crews improvised armor from sandbags around the helm. They operated in wolf packs of 3, coordinated by radio code Muskrat. Radar picket destroyers fed them coordinates. Reconnaissance PBY Catalinas marked Japanese routes with floating flares. The PTs began to score. On November 2nd, 1943, in Vela Gulf, 6 PTs ambushed a Japanese cruiser-destroyer convoy. The sea was calm, moonlight faint. At 01:43, PT-326 under Lieutenant Arthur Riley fired 2 torpedoes at 200 yards. Seconds later, orange flame erupted. Cruiser Sendai was hit amidships. Secondary explosions tore her apart. Within 10 minutes, she sank with over 400 men. Nearby, PT-323 fired at destroyer Shigur but missed by yards. Yet in the confusion, the Japanese formation broke, colliding under their own smoke screens. The sea smelled of oil and cordite, Riley recalled in his report, Action Report 2nd Nov 1943. Our decks were slick with spray and sweat. We could see burning faces in the water. Technically, the victory was small, 1 cruiser against a dozen. But psychologically, it was seismic. The Imperial Navy began diverting heavy cruisers to safer routes, escorted by destroyers that burned tons of fuel nightly. Japanese officers now ordered double lookouts and longer blackouts. The myth of their invincibility in night combat fractured. The PTs had cost the U.S. Navy barely $300,000 per unit, 1/60th the price of a single cruiser. By 1944, the PT concept reached its zenith. The Navy operated over 40 squadrons across the Pacific, from New Guinea to the Philippines. They escorted landing craft, ambushed barges, rescued downed airmen, and even shelled shore positions. Their Packard engines, originally designed for P-51 Mustangs, consumed 100-octane fuel at 100 gallons per hour. Mechanics overhauled them every 200 hours, often knee-deep in seawater. Supplies came by barge, sometimes days late. Yet morale remained fierce. "We fought for every gallon," said motor machinist Albert Chalker, "and every gallon took us 1 mile closer to the enemy." The Japanese response was desperate. They equipped destroyers with extra 25mm guns and launched special anti-PT missions. But their gunners found it maddening to track targets smaller than a fishing boat, moving faster than their turrets could traverse. Torpedoes fired at PTs ran too deep. Shells overshot or ricocheted. Once, near Mindoro, PT-490 dodged 25 shells in 2 minutes, engines roaring, spray rising in silver arcs. The skipper reported, "It felt like we were inside a typewriter." By war's end, PT boats claimed over 200 enemy ships destroyed or damaged, including cruisers, destroyers, transports, and countless barges. More than 400 boats were lost, mostly to air attack or accidents, but their record of harassment was unmatched. The Japanese Navy, already strangled by fuel shortages, found itself bleeding from 1,000 cuts inflicted by plywood predators. Strategically, the PTs never decided the Pacific War, but they changed its texture. They proved that agility could challenge mass, that plywood could outthink steel. They blurred the line between sailor and soldier, between patrol and battle. When the war ended, most PTs were burned or scuttled, their engines silenced in lagoons they once ruled. Yet their legend endured, not because they sank the most tonnage, but because they showed that courage, speed, and innovation could make the smallest vessel a weapon of terror to empires. In the cold arithmetic of war, Japan's heavy cruisers represented power measured in displacement and caliber. The PT boats represented power measured in imagination and nerve. When those two met in the dark waters of the Pacific, the world learned that even the smallest craft could overturn the balance of fear. In the end, it wasn't the weight of armor but the will behind plywood that sank the giants.